I thought a lot about what am I going to talk about today. And keywords, Google, media, mediation. Then I said, no, I think the best thing to do is to talk about my personal experiences, because I can share them with you. It's been years since I've been on the field, and like what Milos said, I've covered a lot of conflicts. Afghanistan, Libya, Iraq, Syria, and every conflict is different. I mean, some could be insurgencies, others a full-blown war. But there's one thing in common, and that is there's human suffering, and this is our job, and it is a very big responsibility to, speak on behalf of those who cannot speak. Okay, this may sound, what is she talking about? But yes, it is. It's what keeps you strong in a way that, you look at these people, they cannot speak. So, I'll bear the sound of mortars or whatever, because I have a duty and a responsibility, and that's why telling the truth is very important as well. Now, is there an absolute truth? People will say no, everybody sees things in a different way. A certain incident can be seen by two people in a very different way. So it is a very, very difficult job. And why do we do this? Some people have told me maybe it's the adrenaline. Maybe. Well, definitely it's not the salary at the end of the month, because my colleagues don't need to go to these areas and they get the same salary, so they can stand outside a government palace. Why do you do this? Is it for the fame, or is it, to brag to people, oh, I dodged a bullet? Well, I hope not, because it's serious. It's really, really serious. I mean, right now I get messages from people in Ghouta, and and maybe they want their voices to be heard. Why are they sending it to me? Because maybe they feel if I put a tweet, it could help them. I don't know, but. And this is our job. People, pin a lot of expectations on you. So it is there's a very big responsibility. Now, some people have called me a war correspondent. I don't like the terminology, because I don't think covering wars is about covering a front line. It's about or casualties, or, building is damage or destruction. No. A war, a conflict, there's politics behind it, and you have to put things into context. You just don't cover, the suffering. You have to explain the politics behind the conflict. How did we get here, and what is being done to try to resolve the conflict? And this is, I think, where the media's role is with the mediator, this relationship. Some people are called diplomatic correspondents. What does that mean? It means you just talk to diplomats. How can you cover a conflict if you've never been to the country or talked to the people in the country? Fine, you'll get the diplomat's perspective, but and not the people. I've got the chance. I had the chance. I covered Syria on the ground, and I covered the first time that peace talks convened in Geneva in 2014. But after that, I wasn't sent very often to these peace negotiations. But I think people who cover the ground should also be involved in covering those talks, because in one way or the other, we can bring, to the negotiating table, or at least to the people there, what people on the ground, feel. Now, it doesn't mean that a diplomatic correspondent is not successful, don't get me wrong, but I just feel that we can improve the media if it's the same person sometimes who covers these things, because for example, before a delegation heads to a peace conference, you would have talked to them. You would understand what are their red lines, what are they willing to accept, what are they not willing to accept. And maybe information like that can help in the negotiating process. I don't know, I'm not an expert in mediation. But I think our job is about giving context and putting things into perspective, and that's when it's difficult. When you go to a front line, for example, every front line is different, because every battle is different. It's fought for a different reason. Let's say the battle for, I'll use Syria as an example, the battle for Aleppo had a different strategic goal than the battle for Eastern Ghouta, for example. You need to put things in the right perspective. And I used to talk with my colleagues, it's not about going there and boom, boom, and bang, bang. And no, this front line is going to change the course of negotiations, or this front line is going to change the balance of power. And I think that's where sometimes we fail. We fail in putting things into context. And that's why I also think the media needs a more, we need to be in contact more with mediators to understand, because we can present things differently. I'll give you an example, Ghouta. Yes, the Western media, and maybe us as well, people have criticized, okay, you're just talking about the human suffering, children being killed, hospitals being bombed. Well, undoubtedly they are. But we don't know, for example, the details of the negotiations that are happening behind the scenes. We may see the theatrics at the UN Security Council, but there are negotiations behind the scenes. Now, is the demand for 1,000 whatever plus fighters to leave in order to save this this enclave or to save the people. We don't have that information. Give it to us. We will put things into context so the narrative changes. So I think we need to interact more with mediators to present, more information to the public so that it doesn't become one narrative. And I think also being accurate, citizen journalists and activists, yes, we've seen this new phenomenon since the so-called, Arab Spring. Because we've been denied access to a lot of areas, we have no choice but to rely on reports coming from these citizen journalists and activists. And sometimes they do exaggerate, yes. This is one of the challenges we face when reporting news. They tell me, okay, you don't have access to Syria. How can you be talking about what's going on? Well, I have been to Syria in the past. I have met a lot of people. Some of them I've trusted as a source. Others I do not trust at all. I've tested them over time. Maybe once or twice they over-exaggerated. I stopped listening to them. We have to make the most of what we have. Sometimes when you don't have access, you can't just stop doing your job. You have to find a way. So this is another challenge that we face all the time, is the lack of access. And I think Syria is one of the most difficult conflicts to cover. Why? Because you can only cover from one side. As a journalist, you cannot report from the government side and then the next week or the next day report from the rebel side. You cannot cross the lines. Even organizations which report from both sides of the conflict, their same reporter doesn't report from either side because of the restrictions put. So it's very hard to put, a whole picture with what is going on. But it's not only responsibility, we're also, there are little incidents in life that you can actually see or not predict, but have an idea of what is to come. And I saw that, for example, in Libya during the uprising or whatever anyone wants to call it. We were in Zawiya, and the rebels were still engaged in a conflict with the Gaddafi forces, blah, blah, blah. So we had to hide in this staircase. And there was this young boy, 17 years old, and I said, what are you doing here? He said, my father was killed, 3 weeks ago, and he was holding this gun. And I said to him, but, what are you doing here? Then he saw my iPad. And then he saw me, type in English, and I was speaking to him in Arabic. He goes, you see, you speak English, and you have an iPad. And I said, yes. He goes, that's why I'm fighting for a better Libya. And I just looked at him. I said, an iPad to learn English? I mean, this is what this whole thing means. But it is important. It is for a better life. This is what he wanted. And I will always remember this young boy. But 3 months later, we were in Sirte, on the outskirts of Sirte, when, the rebels were trying to storm the Gaddafi stronghold. And there were 3 men sitting outside who were clearly Gaddafi supporters. And they were very upset. And I sat down next to them, and I said, what's on your mind? He goes, Libya is heading towards a dark tunnel. I said, why? He goes, you see those men with guns? They're going to turn the guns on each other and then turn it against us. And there were 2 stories there that, you see that Libya is not going to be a better place after whatever anyone wants to call it, an uprising, a war, or a revolution, that there were so many challenges ahead. But it is our job as journalists, after seeing things like this, when we report, then people can actually see what is likely, to happen next. And there are many, many stories like this, but I feel also it is important to be accurate and to tell the truth, because people pin a lot of hopes and expectations on you, and I've seen this firsthand. Libya, another example in Libya is that we were in Zawiya, and the fight there was like for 2 weeks before the front line just kept moving till we found ourselves in the capital. And then when we found ourselves in the capital, one man came running to me. I know you from Jazeera. So I just looked at him. He goes, you were giving us hope. We were watching you, and we were watching how the rebels were progressing. And I just looked and I realized people do listen to what you're saying. So what you're saying will make a difference in people's lives. Could you imagine if you were exaggerating and saying something, and this man was pinning his hopes on what you were saying? So it's just little things like this that makes our life, or not our life, our job, very, very, very difficult. Now, how to cover a war? It is challenging. Social media, a lot of stuff gets uploaded on the internet. You get videos left, right, and center. How do you verify this video? For example, I'll give you an example. There was a bombing in Azaz about 1.5 years ago, and everyone was saying, hospital hit, hospital hit. Okay, look at the footage very well. It was on a street, and then there were trucks, and then you can see the crater on the ground. Maybe it was a supply convoy that was hit, and the hospital happened to be nearby. Who am I to say that it's just so difficult. And then you sit there and you think, what am I going to say? Everyone is going with, the hospital. Yes, it was hit, but was it a deliberate hit? Or was this supply convoy or this weapons or whatever they thought it was? I don't know. I can't read their minds. But why was this hit? So you have all this video, and you have to try to verify, and it is hard when you don't have access. When you do have access, there's another problem. You are not a judge, you're an observer, you're a witness. You cannot put in, you can't put your opinion in this. And it's sometimes very hard when you see blood, when you see dead bodies being pulled out of a river, 80 of them at the same time, and then you watch people stare at the faces and try to identify whether or not this is a mother, brother, or father. How can you stay neutral and make sure that in your script you're not going to point the finger at anyone? How can you just state facts? So these are challenges we face almost on a daily basis. So, for example, I always ask myself, I don't like to talk about competitor channels, but a reporter from CNN gave her testimony to the UN Security Council, and I asked myself, was that right? Is that our job? Then I said, maybe, yeah, because maybe we are eyewitnesses, maybe we have a right to say something, or are we overstepping our boundaries? Now, these are all questions, I do not have the answers to them, but these are questions that we ask ourselves every single day. Where do we draw the line? Where do we say, okay, this is all we can say, this is all we can do, or can we suggest? But people do come to us, a lot of people, like I told you, I get messages, ever since this morning, I'm just answering them, and I can understand what people think. For example, I asked the boy, this young 22-year-old media activist, I said to him, what do people feel? He said, oh, we know, there is no ceasefire. Russia wants to exterminate Ghouta and wants to kill every person here. I said, Hazem, I understand you're under a lot of stress, but please explain to me. Yes, this is about, killing us all or forcing us to leave. And then you realize all these people, this leads to extremism. This is yet another conflict we are thinking about in the future. So these things we see. And then when you go and you listen to diplomats or the peace negotiators talk about, political transition, transfer of power, constitution, elections, this is a political settlement or a political deal. What nobody is talking about is real peace, how these people are going to live together. What is going to happen to the thousands of people who were, for example, sent from one area, transferred to another area? How will the new Syria look like? These issues, as far as I know, are not being discussed. And then when these people come to you as a journalist, what are they talking about? Do we have a future? We're worried about this, we're worried about that. So yes, our job is very difficult because we are dealing with people who suffer a lot, and sometimes they look to you, give us an answer when you don't have an answer. But I think the media and the mediator, I think there should be a closer relationship. I think we should be given a little bit more information that would help us at least put things into context, and so that people don't come out with an idea of very extreme views about, either side. I don't know if there's anything else. Mediators, diplomats, not mediators, diplomats, or those who attend peace negotiations are sometimes so out of touch with reality. Again, Syria is another example, because when Mu'azz al-Khatib was the head of the SNC, the main opposition body, he was suggesting peace talks. So we said, okay, perfect, this is a great peg. We're going into Aleppo. Let's ask the people what they think. Half the people told me, who is he? And the other half said, who is he to decide whether we want to talk or not? So there was such a detachment from those who were attending Geneva and those people who were living, in the country. So, I think I prefer to answer questions. It's my job, answer questions more than, just talking and...
But you should be asking questions, no?
Well, no.
No, today, no,
today,
not
no.
allowed, yeah. But you raised that, we were all expecting to hear many answers today, but you are raising some important questions.
Yeah.
And the key question is peace and reconciliation. We are all talking about peace and reconciliation agreements and all this. Is it really a judicial thing which could be resolved by an agreement on the piece of paper, or is it psychological, emotional thing?
It is psychological and emotional, but also there should be, I'm just telling you what I've heard from the people on the ground, is why aren't they talking about our future? What happens to us, Where do we go back to our homes? So many people were moved from one area to the other. What happens to them? This was a problem in Lebanon. It was one of the And it's still an issue today. I mean, people have not returned to their homes. So I'm just saying, I am relaying, because it's my job to be that link, relaying what people on the ground are thinking or feeling to those who are supposed to put things together. And, you know, it's not for me to answer.
No?